Welcome back to another episode of Discography Dive, where we dive into someone's discography, mainstream or underground, talk about their best tracks in my opinion, and then rate them as an artist. Our next artist that we'll be diving into is none other than the late great Xxx Tentacion. Now, Xxx Tentacion, or X, I'll call him X for short, so I don't have to say his full name the entire time. Blew up on the scene abruptly. I believe back in like 2017, early 2017, with his hit single "Look at Me." Whether him knowing or not, him actually inspiring a whole new style and kind of being the face of a style of rap that would have been prominent throughout that year in 2017 to all the way to halfway to mid to late 2018, where he would then turn in from yelling and screaming to then making sadder, more mellow cuts. Now, I've never been the biggest X fan, the biggest X stan. I could absolutely see his appeal. I could see why they loved him. And I was just as shocked and sad as everybody when he passed away at the peak of his career. Now, since this is our first deceased artist, and that there are posthumous records released under his name after he's dead, my rating will not. I will not put those posthumous records into my rating. I will judge simply the records based on what he was doing while he was alive. Any posthumous records I've listened to his discography a multitude of times, so I can kind of tell which tracks look like they were obviously finished, and which tracks look like they were threw together by their label. Unfortunately, the issues with like deceased artists is that their left out stuff has kind of been used for essentially grave robbing. This is not just the case with him. This is the case with Juice WRLD. The same thing with Pop Smoke. Essentially, kind of overdoing it and really putting him in places where he either doesn't belong, or B, releasing mediocre half-wit cuts and trying to artificially clean them up the best way they can. And honestly, in my opinion, I think that's very it's quite sad, and it's honestly quite pathetic of the label to do that because it's kind of tarnishing the legacy they've left. I believe it personally would be better to let their work be their work and let them die, let the work be left from when they were alive and let it be dead. And any completed or definitely records that look like they were definitely at least worth the release, actually release them. But that's a story, and that's a whole another discussion for another day. So obviously, at the time he was alive, I wasn't a big fan. Especially when he went from his anger. I judge X in two different settings. I call it Angry X and Sad X. Angry X always being where he's like yelling, screaming, and that was really his main MO for a majority of his first half of his career. Then when he started getting in a different mindset, he started maturing. He then turned, I would call Sad X, which is much more mellow, much more somber, slower sounds and cuts. He is very rock influenced, not just really just a rapper, but he also understands. He did understand great instrumentation, some of his sounds in his discography, and just some of the raps he's been on are some of the most iconic sounds of all time. And I think they'll be around for a long time, especially with the fan base he built while he was alive. And like I said, I'll be speaking my opinion on all of it. So the playlist I made was a playlist based off like all the tracks I found the best of his, whether they're my favorites or not, and whether or not how much I liked them. The biggest issue I always had with X, was that besides when it comes to, first of all, let's get the obvious out the way for me. So Look at Me, obviously a banger. I'm not really the biggest fan of it, but I can appreciate its appeal. I can see why people like it, so I put it on the playlist for sure. I can see why you would like it. So, and it's actually one of his upper quality songs. But then we get to his other singles of Xxtentacion, Gospel, which I wasn't really a big fan of at all. A Ghetto Christmas Carol, Banded Up, and I'm kind of jumping around the years, all the way to Bad, which Bad I can actually tolerate. Then obviously all the posthumous singles that were released, which, majority of them weren't that good. The only ones I actually liked was Riot, released in 2020. Bad Vibes Forever. Didn't really couldn't really like it. Didn't really like it overall. Didn't sound that good. Didn't sound really anything I could really bop my head to, in my opinion. Though I understand why a lot of people like it. X's first album, which before he released his own, was Xxxtentacion Presents Members Only Volume 3, which I think the album personally is fucking atrocious. Like, as much as I love Ski Mask, the Slum God, much as how great he is and how great he can rap, he kind of is so one-dimensional, and X kind of follows that one-dimensional style so heavily, as well as all the other people on the record. So because of that, I just couldn't really listen. Like, this was the most taxing album, I will say. Same thing with the 2019 version of Members Only. I couldn't really stand listening to it, in my opinion. I definitely think Mellow X, Slower X, when he played more into his sad crooning and all that stuff, is a lot better than the screaming X. And I get a lot of his stuff is tongue-in-cheek, especially in those records. But still, I just don't think it's a good sound. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was such a slog to listen through. And then we get to his first real big album, which encompassed some of his biggest hits he's ever made in his career, including Jocelyn Flores, Everybody Dies in Their Nightmares, Revenge, Fuck Love, featuring Trippie Redd, and a myriad of other tracks. But this album, without being said, while iconic, is where my issues with him start to lie. One of my biggest issues is when someone hypes up something and makes it more profound than it actually needs to be. When you have an intro, this isn't the only album he did this with. I believe he did this. Yeah, he did this with 2018 album question mark as well. Well, he'll give you this explanation, this like I said, the explanation, or in 2018 album it was called Instructions, to where he basically kind of talks like he's gonna say something that's very complex, very deep, very profound, and very just otherworldly. And that's fine if you're gonna actually carry through. But when majority of your songs, I would say, are more iconic clips instead of actual full fleshed out songs, and majority of the time you're mumbling, crooning through them, and that's not to say it's him entirely. I understand why people like, because the topics he did talk about, while very, in my opinion, shallow and very surface level, he did cover a multitude of mental health things. I think people fell in love more with his character outside of music than really did in it, because when he talked about it outside on interviews, he spoke of it beautifully, and he was definitely had a lot more thought, and he definitely cared about what he put out. So it was just a shame for me to be like, okay, Jocelyn Flores, iconic instrumental, amazing, love it, but when you listen to what he's saying, or listen to something with Depression Obsession and all these other songs, it's essentially the same thing of, I'm sad, I'm suicidal, I hate myself. I'm sad, I'm suicidal, a friend killed themselves, I hate myself. And it's kind of that on loop. And while that's relatable, and people would be like, he helped me through a lot, and I'm not trying to take that away from you. Please don't think I'm hating on him, because I appreciate what he's done. I don't think at all, if you're talking about on just a music level, on a song level, that they're actually actual songs. They're much more iconic clips. Like, the average song is like 50 seconds to a minute and a half on his album, especially on 17. I don't think it was very good. I don't think it's as complex as he liked to portray it was, and as deep and as like controversial as he thought he was. But with that being said, there are still a lot of positives that he did. He definitely showed his understanding of musicality with a lot of acoustic guitars, a lot of rock influence, and especially a lot of melodic rap. Like I said, he was kind of the head mantle for that melodic mumbling style, like Lil Uzi Vert, along with Juice WRLD, along with a few others. And it's very impressive that he sorry, I just accidentally played Jocelyn Flores. That he definitely pioneered and really brought a style out that was prominent through that whole year. That's what made him his biggest. And I believe most of the emotion that people relate to can be drawn more from the fact of his sad tone and melodic crooning than his actual lyrics, since majority of the time you can't really understand what the hell he's saying. We then move on to his 2018 record, the last record he dropped before his untimely passing. the Question Mark album, where again he drops this introduction of called instructions, where he goes out and says, if you're not open minded, don't listen to this album. If you're not ready to dive into deep into yourself, don't listen to this album. Again, this faux woke, I'm so profound attitude he had at the time, despite him being like not even like just reaching adulthood. And that's not him. That's not me saying that he doesn't have anything complex or anything interesting to say. He definitely did. But when you advertise it as such a unique experience, it kind of falls flat on its face when you're essentially talking about the same thing you've always talked about, which is suicidal thoughts, self-harm, and self-loathing, self-hatred, depression, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, toxic relationships. And these are great things to cover, but when you do that in such a way where it's the same way that a lot of people have done it, it's not really that unique, besides the fact that you just sound a lot better than majority of them. The record kind of fell flat for me too. I did enjoy a lot of iconic songs off this. Moonlight, obviously. Um, uh, Sorry, excuse me. Moonlight, sad. I actually did enjoy. And I enjoyed his rehat, especially how that song was designed. That was one of the songs I feel like that was a more complex side, because he always would say all this stuff and then say, I know I'm sad, I know that, I know I'm pathetic, I know I'm this. Numb, I thought it was okay. His melodic crewing, his layering, and his when he makes stuff grand, I did enjoy that part. Obviously, the iconic song "Hope" and "Before I Close My Eyes," very melodic and very catchy. Again, reiterating the same theme. And like I said, he's not completely awful, but again, I think in comparison to what you hyped it up to be, to what it turned out to be, wasn't that good. And I think a lot of looking back, people are gonna have their biases, because as great as you are, and as he was, and as great as of an influence he was, in terms of actual song quality, he wasn't really as good as people like to make him. So that's why whenever they gave him this legend moniker after he died, I kind of took issue with it. But again, that was a hill I would let them die on, because at the end of the day, when he recently passed, I wasn't going to argue, because again, what good does that argument make at this point? But after being 4 years removed, I never saw him as a legend. I saw him as on path. If he kept going on the trajectory he was going, I could see him in the conversation. But in terms of, influence and stuff, he influenced enough for his time for him to be considered legendary. I don't think he was there yet. And unfortunately, he was sadly killed before he could ever reach that moniker, but I do believe he was on pace to make it. We then get into the posthumous stuff, and while this will not be heavily influenced on my rating of him, I will still talk about my favorites. The album Bad Vibes Forever, again, I just think it just kind of a spit in the face of the memory, and I think it goes downhill from there. But there are a couple songs that I actually thought were, like, obviously that were either close to completion or completed, just weren't released yet, that I thought were really good. Train Food, I absolutely loved. It was the closest thing that he had to an actual full song. The images he painted, it was very abrupt, very intense. One of his more intense and enticing, more engaging cuts that he's ever released. I definitely loved that one. I loved Whoa, Mind in Awe. I thought that was pretty good. While most of it is just melodic crooning, the same thing as he did when he was alive, that instrumental is pretty good, and again, another iconic sound for him. And then again, while there's nothing really much layered to it, I would say "What Are You So Afraid Of" was the final song I really liked off that record. I liked like I said, his melodic crooning is really a catchy, enticing sound that he's always been able to push through, and I really did enjoy that. I don't know if I talked about it, but the song "Bad," again, another iconic song. But again, you can really understand what the hell he was talking about. I'd have to actually look at the lyrics, and while I get what he's talking about, I just couldn't really vibe to it that much, but it was definitely a highlight of his while he was alive. I actually liked, like I said, I'm pretty sure I talked about the posthumous single Riot. I didn't think that was too bad. It's kind of more of a freestyle of him rapping. It showed his flow, his cadences, his lyricism. And while his lyricism wasn't bad, again, I'm not going to judge that because of the simple fact that it was released after he died. The final song I have on here is actually the latest song, which really didn't have much of X, really. It was True Love with none other than Kanye West, where X is kind of intro the chorus and he's singing about this theme, and then Kanye drays down some bars. And while I do enjoy the song and his vocals were used actually pretty well, I wasn't mad at this song at all. But yeah, overall, that's really all the songs I like the most out of his. I can understand his appeal. I understand what made him so good, so relatable, so understanding for people to, and so easy to get behind. Kind of his whole story is kind of detailing the man, a man who he considered himself a horrible person at that time, and it was the process of him getting better, and kind of showing all the phases of he went through his like short life, but even his short time in the public eye. I could get behind it. He understood what it meant to make music, and he understood which music kind of tugs on the heartstrings and kind of would really get at you emotionally and create a relatable theme and a relatable sound. He knew cadence. He knew all the basics. I just think when it came to layers, he didn't really get into that much. And unfortunately, we'll never really know, like, truly from him if he was able to do that. But based off the things that he left when he was here, it didn't look to be the case. If I was to give him a rating as an artist, I would give him a light to decent 6 out of 10. Not horrible, but I did appreciate him for his time was here. And this is no way to disrespect his memory. This is no way to shit on him. But this is just my opinion based on solely just the music. I like, as a person, I'm sure he was great, and his memory will be live on forever. At the end of the day, you don't have to agree with me. And if he did something for you, and if he impacted your life, changed your life in a positive way, I'm not here to take that away. I'm simply here to talk about my opinion on his music. That is all. I'm not here to sway you to not like him. This is just how I felt. I believe he's a 6 out of 10. If he's a 10 out of 10 in your book, if he's a 0 out of 10 in your book, that's your opinion. I'm all open to that. Just know I'm not here to destroy the image of him to others. I'm not here to disrespect his memory, because that's not what I'm doing. I am simply reviewing his music based on a musicality level and a musicality level only. That being said, this was Discography Dive for Xxxtentacion. Stay safe. Love y'all. Bye-bye.